This guitar lesson video was requested by a YouTube user from Mexico named Johnny Acid Trip. This person basically just commented on one of my other lesson videos asking if I could please do this song, so here we are. It's written by Cheech and Chong called Rock Fight. And if anyone else has any songs they want me to do a lesson video on, just leave a comment and I'd be happy to try. And of course, if you see a little red box down there that says subscribe, please click on it. It costs you nothing, but it helps me out a lot. Okay, let's get started. Before we start playing, let's just listen to the song a little bit and we'll talk over the form and the chords. Okay, so there's basically only two parts to this song. There's this part, which I'm gonna call the verse. It also doubles as the intro, you can see here. But there's only two chords for this part. There's the D chord right here, 2 measures of D, and the E chord, 2 measures of E. Goes back and forth between the D for 2 measures and the E for 2 measures. But the whole time the bass is holding the E note. It's what we call in music an ostinato, right? So the chords are going back and forth between D and E. Meanwhile, the bass is just holding the E. So that's the first part of the song. The second part is here. This is what I'm going to call the chorus. It goes back and forth between an A chord and an E chord, right? Here's that A chord, and then it walks down to the E chord. It does this 3 times. Here's the A again, walking down to the E. And then the final chord for this section is the B7 chord. So it only does that, for 4 measures. And then we're back into the verse. That's the D to the E, all right? We'll go over all how to play all these parts later in this video. But basically the verse part just goes back and forth between those 2 chords. The D chord and the E chord. And the bass is getting held, with just staying on the E. And we can do all that on the guitar. I'll show you how to do that. And then here's the chorus again, right? A chord, little walk down to the E chord. 3 times it does this. A chord, little noodle, and then walk down to the E chord. We'll go over all this later in the video. Here's the A chord again, walking down to the E chord. And the turnaround here up to the B7 does that 4 measures. Yeah, and then back to the verse. That's it. Just those 2 parts of the song. Okay, let's break it down a little bit and go part by part. Okay, so if we wanted to play just the most basic version of the song, we could play those 4 chords just using the open chords, right? Like the cowboy chords. We could play the D chord like this. We could play the E chord like this. Right? The open A chord like this. And then the final open chord would be that B7, kind of looks like this. So if you wanted to and you already knew those chords, you could strum along and all 4 of those chords would work. But what I'm hearing the guitar players in the song do is something a little bit different. What I'm hearing them do, instead of playing the D chord like this, they're actually playing it using an A shape. So they're taking this A shape here, but they're sliding it up to the 7th fret. So now your ring finger is covering the 7th fret of your D string, your G string, and your B string. And your index finger is going to go on the 5th fret of the A string. So now you've got all the chords, all the notes of that D chord, right? You've got the D, the A, another D, and then the F sharp. And you also have that open E string available to play that E in the bass it happens, right? So you've got the E in the bass with the D chord over it. And then all you have to do to play the E chord is slide that whole shape up 2 frets. So now our index finger is on the 7th fret of the A string, and our ring finger is covering the 9th fret of the D string, the G string, and the B string. Gives us all the notes of that E chord, right? The E, the B, another E, and the G sharp, plus the low E in the bass. So those would be one way to play the 2 chords of the verse, right? And the strumming kind of sounds like this. Right, so I'm actually kind of hitting the bass, the E note, the low E string, like on the 8th notes. But I'm playing the chord just on, it's on the upbeat of beat 1, it's on the downbeat of beat 3, and then the upbeat of beat 4, right? 1 and 3, 4 and. And the way that I'm getting those notes of the chord to not ring out the whole time is when I want the chord to happen, obviously I'm pushing all the way down firmly against the frets. But when I am just wanting the low E string to go without the chord happening, I'm kind of lifting up my fingers lightly so that they're just resting on the strings. They're not pushing all the way down further enough to touch the frets. They're just resting there to kind of mute the strings so that only the E string rings out. Like, that makes sense at all, but so that's the verse part. Now the chorus part, we have that A chord, but instead of playing the A chord with our ring finger now, we're going to play it with our index finger. So our index finger is covering the 2nd fret of the D string, the G string, and the B string. And we've got that open A string. So there we've got all the notes of our A chord. We've got an A, an E, another A, and a C sharp. Right? The reason why we're doing it with our index finger is so that our ring finger can be open and available to play the 4th fret of the D string. And so there we're actually having the F sharp added in there. So it's, instead of just being a regular A chord, it's an A6 chord. And so we're going to go back and forth between the regular A chord and the A6 chord. Right? It kind of sounds like this. Right? So I'm just playing the A chord and then adding my ring finger on the 4th fret of that D string to get the F sharp in there. Right? And then it has the little walk down. So you're on the 3rd fret of the low E string, the 2nd fret of the low E string, and that's the walk down. And then it ends up on the E chord. Right? The E chord would be your 2nd fret. Your middle finger playing the 2nd fret of the A string, your ring finger playing the 2nd fret of the D string, and your index finger playing the 1st fret of the G string. Right, there's your standard open E chord. So that whole chorus part, you've got your A to the A6, and then a walk down, and the E chord. Does that 3 times. All right, here's the last time. And then the B7 chord, instead of playing it down here like I showed you earlier, I'm hearing them actually play it up here, so that we're barring, our index finger is barring across all the strings on the 7th fret. Our ring finger is playing the 9th fret of the A string, and our middle finger is playing the 8th fret of the G string. So we've got all the notes of that B7 chord up here. All right, so the reason why we're playing that B7 chord up here is so we can do this thing where we lift up our middle finger every once in a while. I think it's actually on the end of beat 2. So it's like this. That kind of adds a little interest to the chord. Instead of just, you know, playing the chord and strumming it, we were lifting our middle finger up. And yeah, so it does that for four measures. And back to then it goes right back into the verse, which is the D chord with the E in the bass, right? So that's it, the only 2 parts of the song right there. Let's go back and let's rock out to the whole song now.